Welcome and good morning. You know, in the past few years, to to Martha and I, it seems that every family we know has personal experience with some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. Why so many? Is it all the organic food we eat? Perhaps the meatless and gluten-free diets? Or maybe it's those almond croissants that I love so much. But it's not likely. The answer is really much simpler than that. In the early 1900s, when our great-grandparents were living, only 2 to 3% of the population lived beyond the age of 70. By the time my parents died in the early 2000s, 2 times as many, 5% of us, were living over the age of 70. Today, thanks to generations of cardiologists, oncologists, brilliant scientists, almost 8% of Americans are over 70. And in a few more years, 10% of us will be over 70. And even the most casual research will show you that we are the ones, those of us over 70, who will develop dementia. Nearly 15% of us suffer from some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. And by the time you're my age, over 80, you have a 30% chance. If you're interested in numbers, that's actually greater than your chance of having cancer. A few months ago, when I began thinking about this topic, my first question was, what is the relationship between dementia and Alzheimer's? So here's what I found from ChatGPT. Dementia is a general term for a variety of diseases which cause memory loss, confusion, difficulty with language, problem solving, reasoning, or judgment. Doctors use cognitive tests for diagnosis. Alzheimer's is the major subtype of dementia. As many as 80% of people diagnosed with dementia have Alzheimer's. After the cognitive tests, PET scans and MRIs are commonly used to rule out stroke damage, tumors, or to find the abnormal protein buildup which is present in Alzheimer's. We are all aware that this disease is of great interest to our scientists in pharmaceutical countries, but so far their success is pretty limited. For today, the question we and our friends have when this disease arrives at our doorstep is, how do we support each other as compassionate, caring human beings? With this in mind, our morning will feature a panel of 4 people who have personal experience with dementia and Alzheimer's. Would you just wave your hand or stand up? Ken Ettlinger, Virginia St. John, John Andrews, and Linda Coleman. Thank you. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Fork. We meet here in worship every Sunday at 10:30 to exchange ideas, read together, sing a few songs, and enjoy each other's company. If you are here for the first time, you will discover we are an eclectic group. Some of us overeducated, others with high school only, all from a wide variety of religious backgrounds: Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, occasionally even 1 or 2 that were raised Unitarian Universalists. Although you might paint us as liberal if you're using a broad brush, our key principle is to respect each other's search for truth and meaning. You'll discover we do not all agree on the details of theology, of capitalism, of immigration, of pacifism, of warfare itself. These can make for interesting conversations. In our fellowship together, we do our imperfect best to listen with compassion and respect, understanding that each of us arrives in this place with different gifts and needs. We deal with conflict honestly, yet speak with care and respect. So do we have visitors who would like to introduce themselves this morning? No? Okay. Please be sure you signed your guest book at the door if you're new. Let's take a moment now to greet each other.
Hi, Elizabeth. We see you. Hi, Diana.
So my name is Mark Potter. I am your service leader today. Our musician is Sarah Gordon. Reverend Kimberly is managing Zoom. Our Reverend Kimberly is managing Zoom. Thank you. And Kent Martin is our camera person. Sarah will get us started today with some fun playing Cluck Old Hen Harvest Home Medley. And now Kent and Sarah will lead us in singing hymn number 311, Let It Be a Dance. Why don't we rise to sing? Oh, sorry, I missed something. We got to light the chalice first. Ken, would you light the chalice? Thanks. We light this flame to remind us love is the center. As we grow and connect, mature and deepen, love remains the center. When the light of truth burns all else away, love remains. And now let's sing, Let It Be a Dance.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with the sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. We'll learn to lead, feel the rhythm, feel the need, to keep the house and plant the seed. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. Time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the darkness is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Sun, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
So later in the service, we'll all light candles for our friends with dementia or Alzheimer's, and that'll be in the center. Now, in this time, we'll share our personal joys and concerns. If you're here in the meeting house, please come to the microphone and drop a stone into the water. If you're joining us online, raise your hand or indicate in the chat, and our host will unmute you and spotlight your video. We light one more okay. Sarah plays The Boys of Wexford. We use 2 baskets that would pass the pink basket for your gifts for the work to support the congregation. The blue basket in the back of the room is for the Helping Hand Fund, which supports the congregation's work beyond these walls. A third of the Helping Hand Fund also assists people in need through the minister's discretionary fund. So now, I'd like everyone who's had personal experience with dementia or Alzheimer's through a friend, a relative, someone close to you, to come up to the table in the center. Let's see if it gets this thing to light. And light a candle for them. There's plenty of candles, so if you have more than one person to name, use more than one candle. And start from the center and use the center candle. This is for my mother, Jean Potter, who was great until the end.
This is for my mom, Josephine Ettlinger.
This is for a friend, Patricia, who's alive.
for my grandmother, Mary Wagner, and my dad, Louis Andrews.
This is for my father, Dave Tiger, and my very close friend, Mary Chilla.
This is for my mother, Claire Fries, who was also great till the end.
This is for my dearest partner, Tom Taylor, who will forever live in my memory.
For Marilyn Wilson, who once called me a surrogate daughter.
This is for my grandmother, Katie, who could not remember from day to day how things tasted. And so every time she had a piece of pie, she said, "My, this is delicious." It was just a revelation every time she had pie.
This is for a family friend, Candace. And the other is for the mother of a good friend who is the first time I ever heard about UU. They were a UU family.
This is for my good friend and former adventure buddy, Roland Muser, who I still think about often.
This is for my Aunt Harriet, who had a house in Hampton Bays. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, good. And was a psychiatric social worker long before women were in that field.
This is for my husband, Jerry.
I think I'm breaking the rule a little bit. This is for my husband, Don, who was never quite the same after a concussion. And now his brother has water on the brain that seems to be an inherited condition that we're wondering if Don suffered from also.
This is for my Uncle Charles. Is the light, please? And my uncle.
This is from my stepmother, Lillian. Dear heart. We didn't realize how difficult it was for Dad taking care of her all those times, and then Dad died first. Oh. And this is for my daughter-in-law's mother, Donna Gillo, who's dealing with it right now.
This is for my sweet sister, Linda, who isn't here today, but she has been told that she's in the first stages of dementia.
Yes. Who? Oh.
And please, for Tina Corin, light a candle for her friend Petra, who some of us know. And for myself, for my cousin, Cheryl Cooper, who died way too young from Alzheimer's.
And I don't think we should forget Jane Gray, one of ours, who's still at Peconic Landing. And Jean Wisner. Charlene Murphy. Go ahead. And this for Cousin Mary. Wow. Let me warn anybody with long hair, don't lean over these candles. Okay.
Also from Zoom, from Michael Daly, a candle for Bernie Rohi. From Laura Tucker, a candle for Kathleen Tucker. From Tina Corin, a candle for her friend Linda.
Oh, that's great. So let's go on now to a hymn. Hymn number 18, What Wondrous Love Is This? And Kent will lead us in this as well.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, that takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, O my soul, O my soul, friends to me gathered round, O my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend with I will sing with thanks unto the end. I will sing.
So now, if the panel would bring your chairs here into the center, I'm going to put my mic down here. So, okay. I want to thank the panel and thank in particular Ken Ettlinger for helping me develop this service. And now, would you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little about your experience with dementia and Alzheimer's? Ken?
I'm Ken Ettlinger. It's interesting because now that I'm at Peconic Landing, where the average age is probably 80 years old, we actually watch people in the community disappear from independent living through the doors of no return. It's a one-stop community where you age. And so we see people developing Alzheimer's or dementia and then kind of disappearing. And it's interesting because a lot of people tend to, I think especially elderly people, get a little concerned when they see someone in the community becoming less able to carry on a conversation. And these people are very often kind of, people back away from them because I think we're all maybe a little concerned about developing dementia. My mom came to live with me and my son in Flanders about 10 years before she died. And at that time, she was in probably the medium stage of Alzheimer's. And so I had 10 years to really get to know her in a very different way. And maybe I'll share some of those experiences later.
Hi, Jenny St. John. My mom died of dementia in 2019 and suffered with it for about 5 years. I moved from my house in with her for about 1.5 years to help care for her while we were trying to secure other long-term care. So it was a journey. It was a journey and a lot of changes and a lot of difficulty with how the system supports people with Alzheimer's and caregivers.
Well, when I was in college in the 1960s, my grandmother, who lived with the family, of course I was away at college at the time, but I'd come home for vacation and whatnot, and I could see, since I wasn't home constantly, every time I came home, I could see the progression. And my grandmother loved to play a card game called Schafskopf, so I learned how to play it with her, and I saw how she became less and less able to remember the rules, and finally she couldn't play it anymore. And then in the 1980s, my father, Louis, gradually, around 1989, I would say, my brother Tom, when my wife and I were coming out there for Christmas, he says, "You're going to notice Dad has kind of slipped a bit." And I was out there that time, and I didn't really notice it too much. But then the next year, yes, it was definitely happening. And then the following year, it was more. And towards my mother and my father both died within a month of each other in 1993. And the last couple of years were very trying for my brother and me and my mother in different ways.
Thank you all for inviting me here today. I do have Alzheimer's. Nobody in my family that I know of has had it. My parents both died quite young, in their 50s, and I think maybe a grandmother did, but I can't be sure. I was diagnosed about 3 years ago now, and I don't know how much you want me to go into my experience now.
Later, yeah.
Later, okay. So that's where I'm at. Nice to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, everybody. So, Ken, so when did you finally become convinced that your mom really was suffering with Alzheimer's? What made you know that?
I think because my nephews had packed up a lot of her belongings and showed up in my driveway and said, "You got to do something." Actually, it was you could see things developing more and more, and even more so when my dad passed away. Then she became to behave very erratic. You know, I would find her chopping up the furniture to stoke the fire, the wood burning stove that we had she would do all kinds of bizarre things. I was recently divorced, and I would pick up my son and then stop over on Friday nights, and she'd always have dinner. She was a wonderful cook, and eventually she just went up to the stove, and she didn't know what to do. And eventually the refrigerator became progressively more bare, and it was clear that something had to be done. So it was a gradual transition, and once she was living with me in Flanders, it was really great because we had the resources of the Southampton Senior Center, which was really wonderful. It was right down the road from us in Flanders, and I could drop her off before work, and she would be taken care of with the people there. And I could reduce my teaching schedule so I could teach 3 courses instead of 5, and that allowed me that extra time. It cut my salary way down, but it also allowed me the time to be with her and pick her up and so forth. So it worked out really well. And then my niece helped me. She lived in Riverhead, and she helped me a great deal, Andrea, and my son, Zach. But it was a gradual process. And then it really kind of dawned on me that I should do something when, of course, she showed up with all her belongings, which was quite a day.
So, Jenny, what about you? What made you understand you were really in this?
Well, it was a bit of a different process. My dad had passed away in 2014 from congestive heart failure, and my mom had a bad fall that weekend, and she was actually in early stages of Parkinson's. So from that point on, she was wheelchair bound. It all happened pretty quickly in terms of that decompensation. And she had baseline cognitive testing before, so that was, and she went through certain phases that people with dementia will do. For example, she had a delusion, which is not all that uncommon, that her house had been replicated. She was in a replicate house down to the very tiniest detail. And we actually had somebody, a part-time caregiver at that time, and she was very angry at this caregiver for doing that to her, putting her in this replicate house. And the caregiver would take her and drive her around. This was on Shelter Island, and then drive her back and say, "See, Mom Claire, you're home. This is your home." And my mother would say, "This is not my home." And my mother was a very kind, good person, and suddenly she was being really nasty to this lovely woman. So, we were dealing with supporting the caregiver, trying to just help my mother at this point. You know, she did come out of that and she became very sweet, but, you know, she had lost herself, you know, and I think that was one of the most difficult pieces of it, that the mother that I knew was not there anymore. And that happened really very, very quickly. So that was, yeah.
Thanks. John?
Well, as I said, I only saw my dad intermittently because he and my mother lived in Indiana, and my brother lives in Indiana still. And so, of course, I mentioned the time my brother warned me that Dad was slipping, but at that time, I didn't notice that he was slipping, but my brother depended on Dad for business advice and so forth, and so he sort of sensed it sooner than I did. But the next year, it was obvious that things were not going well. But my mother was in total denial, and that was one of the difficulties that we had, because she just wouldn't process what was going on, and of course that made everything more difficult. But it was what it was.
So, Linda, when were you diagnosed, and when did the doctors tell you?
No, I'm just going back. Well, I was diagnosed about 3 years ago. I had been working as a nurse. What's that? Can you hear it?
It's on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll explain. I was a nurse all my life, and then had been working with hospice actually before I got diagnosed, but I was having a hard time keeping up with the paperwork. They sent me to a neurologist to have some testing, and the neurologist did an MRI, and the MRI showed amyloid throughout. That all I remember were those words, amyloid throughout. So from there, I went on some medication, started at that point, and then I've been working with a doctor through NYU Langone Hospital, another doctor there since this doctor left. And I don't know how much you want me to go into.
Well, you're still driving. You're going to
you want to know more about it? Yeah, my
Yeah.
activities of daily life are pretty much the same. I am uncomfortable at night because I get lost easily. So if I don't have my phone with me, I will not remember even, like I'm here every Monday night. And I was realizing that I didn't have my phone the last time I went home, and it made me very anxious because I didn't think I could find my way. And I've done it 150 times. So that kind of thing is starting to happen, and creates a lot of anxiety. You know, I feel like I'm always kind of stuffing a little bit of anxiety because I don't know where I'm going to kind of screw up or mess or forget or next. You know, there's always a little bit of that hanging on. Okay. I don't know how. I mean,
What
I can
gives
keep
you
on
strength?
going.
What's giving you strength now?
What gives me strength?
Yeah.
Oh, being here is amazing because I don't know how many of you know, but I've been here for 20 years. Every Saturday and Monday I'm here. So because I've been part of the Zen community for the last 20 years or so. So that has been an incredible source of peace for me, and in this circumstance, because really, you know, so many of the basic tenets of our practice really back up, like not knowing, bearing witness, showing up, letting go of your opinions about things, just being grateful for this day, take care of this moment. I mean, there's so many little refrains that just are, my guidelines every day and give me great, peace mostly. I have a lot of peace of mind and a lot of great joy, which is another part of our practice that you kind of work towards. Well, what is great joy, and how and I didn't know what great joy was until I went through many years of practice, and now I feel like incredibly abundant in my life, a lot of abundant joy, as well as grief and anxiety and sorrow.
Just showing up, you're demonstrating your strength. Thank you. Would you hand the mic to John?
Yes. Yeah.
So, John, how about help from relatives or friends, or special problems with relatives and friends, as your father deteriorated?
Help from relatives or friends?
Yeah. Did your brother take over? Or?
Well, he was 90 miles away, and I was 900 miles away. So he did a lot more than I did because of that, and it sometimes frustrated my brother because towards the end of my parents' lives, the last year of their lives, they were in a nursing home. It was actually a very good nursing home, and it was in the Midwest, which in some respects is better. But at any rate, one day, my brother gets a call from my mother saying, "Tom, you got to get here right away." So Tom says, "Oh my God." He gets in the car, drives the 90 miles over to Bremen, Indiana, where my mom and dad were, and he runs in and says, Mom, what's the matter?" And she says, "I'm out of cigarettes." So my brother was not a happy camper.
Would you mind telling us a story about the time you tried to get your mother or your father picked up by the police?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but there came a time when it was obvious to my brother and me that Dad should not be driving. And I talked to Mom and said, you really should be doing the driving. My mother had this little Plymouth Valiant that had been around for like 20 years, but she could drive it. She was a short lady. And then my dad had this Buick, which she couldn't drive. But every Sunday afternoon, they'd get in the car, Dad would drive, and they'd go around, and she had a map, and she would tell them where to go. And I said, Mom, this is not safe. You got to not let Dad drive. Well, she would not listen. And I won't go into some very now somewhat funny things that happened, but finally I said to my brother, you got to disable the Buick. And he took some convincing, but he finally did, and he removed the distributor, the leads to the distributor. And he left a note, said, any mechanic who is called to fix this car, please call Tom Andrews. And so a couple of days later, he gets a call. He says, I'm the mechanic. What's going on? Somebody pulled out the wires. And Tom says, well, I did because Dad has dementia and he shouldn't be driving and Mom won't listen. So please don't fix the car. And the mechanic says, well, they called me to fix the car. I'm fixing the car. So they were back on the road. And finally, I said, the only thing I can do now is Mom will not listen to her kids, but she will listen to authority. So I called the police department at this little town, and I explained the situation, and I said they're Catholic. Every Saturday afternoon at 4:45, they pull out of their driveway and they drive a mile or so to the church. And I said, I've tried to convince Mom to not let Dad drive, but with no effect. So what I'd like you to do is have an officer there, and when the Buick comes out with an old man driving, find a reason to pull him over and read him the riot act. And so the next Sunday, I was speaking to my mom, and I played dumb, and she says, you'll never guess what happened. And this very nice policeman stopped us and said Dad was weaving and shouldn't be driving, and so I guess he won't be driving anymore. So that she listened to authority, but not to her kids. And But so that was the desperate move we had to make to solve the problem.
So the question is relatives and friends. Did help or hindrance?
Oh, well, I would say a definite help. I mean, my mom had long-term health care, and my brother was very helpful. He's in Colorado, my other brother's in California. I have a sister who now is out here, but was up island. But I would say we all did pitch in. We were fortunate that, that we did pitch in, and ultimately we were able to enlist help through an agency. And being on Shelter Island, it's a very caring community. So the community itself was also very helpful, the Catholic Church and the senior center. So definitely fortunate in that way, for sure.
Ken?
Well, my siblings live hours away, so they really didn't want to be involved, and they couldn't really be, on site. They had to write a note to be to give me the capability of speaking for them, and they were really happy to do that, so that suddenly I had the power to do all my mom's affairs, which is really an important thing for the person who is going into dementia, to take care of all those things that, these are my wishes, and unfortunately that hadn't happened. Once you start realizing that you're now a caregiver, you're almost like the parent, the child parent, and the relationship has changed, and you're doing everything, handling everything that needs to be handled, and the decisions have to be made. And it is overwhelming. I had joint custody of my son, so he was there through the summertime and also all the weekends. And it's interesting, he was in junior high, and there was this sibling rivalry that started because eventually, my mom did behave oddly, like a child sometimes. They would have fights over, whose rock it was, or just really strange things. My mom had an egg in her pocketbook for a while because she wanted to hatch it, and you couldn't remove that egg from her pocketbook. And so, Zach is feeling kind of weirded out, and I sit him aside and I said, you can't be angry. You can't do this kind of, because Grandma can't help out. She just can't help it, but you can. And suddenly something clicked, and he turned into this most empathetic caregiver. It was just what an incredible transition in junior high. He was such an incorrigible kid, and yet he turned into a very, very compassionate person. So he was there to help out, and we always did things that would involve her over the weekend and summer times. She really needed people, and people who have dementia really need people around them, and that was the beauty of having people in my life. Sometimes friends would come over, and they would essentially realize that they really couldn't carry on a very, in-depth conversation with my mom. So sometimes she would just be kind of relegated to the corner, happy, but sometimes she'd say, I'm Josephine Ettlinger, who are you? And people that she knew, but she didn't remember anybody. She knew Zach, she knew me, she knew Andrea, and that was it. Everybody else, including relatives, were just not familiar to her anymore. So it was a strange type of a thing. But the senior center, and eventually the senior center, there were elderly people that complained about my mom to the administration and said, she's really losing it. And they really were freaked out by having someone who was not able to converse. And she was very, she was very content, and she was, a really helpful, good person. She was seldom angry. But yet they just didn't want somebody there in the normal area. So eventually she went to the Alzheimer's unit, which they have in Hampton Bays, which was really a wonderful caring environment. A lot of activity, a lot of mental stimulation. And that's the most important thing. You know, even though people back away from people that they can't communicate with, or they realize that they're losing their facilities, their mental ability, their mental acuity, the most important thing is to just involve. And when there's confrontation, no, there can't be confrontation. If there's an egg and that egg's going to hatch, let it be. You're going to have to wash the pocketbook eventually, but what does it matter? So you have to go with the flow. And that's probably, you know, the most important thing I can say is that, you know, be helpful, respond, sit with the person, even though you don't have a conversation, sit down and be there. And that really means a whole lot, and it really saved us.
I just want to say, one solution to the egg problem would be at night, take the egg out, hard boil it, and put it back.
Yeah, eventually, actually, I put a hole in it and sucked out so it was just an egg, a shell of an egg. And eventually the pocketbook started collecting forks, spoons, knives, salt, pepper, shaper, anything that she could grab at the senior center. She would just, and so the pocketbook would be 10 pounds at the end of the day. And they would put a note in there saying, please return the silverware.
Thanks. I just want to, my mother had 6 children, and so she had plenty of potential help. But one of them moved far away, and from a distance, they decided that my 2 brothers who were taking care of my mother were abusing her in the sense of taking her car away, because she used to come back with bushes on the car, and so they took the keys away. And they had to do things like that in order to keep, and this of course made my mother very unhappy. But my distant brother's reaction was that, oh, you guys must be doing something terribly wrong to treat her like this. I don't know what was going on there. Anyhow, my 2 brothers actually did most of the work, and my 2 sisters did the caring.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because it does become another job, you know. So I was working at the time, and this was, you know, caring for my mother was another job, and just it was so clear. But I wasn't, you know, the main caregivers were the home health aides. But whether it's family or professional, the need, what a difficult job it is, and the need for support and really understanding how 24/7 it is.
So let's go into the necessary planning for this. When you have a relative, a friend that you're close to, what sort of planning needs to be done?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead, yeah.
You're asking what sort of planning should be done?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, obviously, it's a good idea if the parents and the children have a conversation long before there's any need for it. And unfortunately, that tends not to happen because we don't want to face it. And I have a daughter and a son-in-law now, so I'm the older generation, but I remember being the younger generation, and it was, my brother and I really had no idea what their situation was, except in general terms, that my dad was retired and they seemed to have enough wherewithal to live a modest life, but beyond that, it was kind of difficult because I guess the one regret I have is that my brother and I didn't insist on stepping in when my mother was so much in denial, and she would just insist everything is fine, I got this, and so on and so forth, and she didn't want any interference. And afterwards, I realized that she was the one who needed care. She cared for my dad very well, but she needed care, but she didn't want to admit it. So, that's the difficult thing. And other than saying, if you can work your way around having a conversation early on, it's a good thing.
I don't know. That's a hard question. I really live day by day, and I do have, in terms of my future, I mean, I know what's coming down the pike. I know, I know that it's going, I do know how challenging it is because I work with so many people who have this. But for myself, I've got my end-of-life options on paper, what I want to do not resuscitate order, no, don't keep me alive if I've got some. Is that the living will? Yeah, living will, that's the word that I wanted, yeah, living will. So those papers were very important to me to have done and have notarized so that, and I actually keep my DNR in my car so that if I had an accident, somebody's not going to resuscitate me. So that's, and I'm trying to think of other things that, well, obviously conversations with my son and my partner about what I'd like towards, as I go forward, but it's so hard to say. I don't know who I'll be.
So, does anyone else have something to add? Ken, do you have anything to add to this list of things to plan for? Yeah. Okay, so it's 11:30, or it's past 11:30, but I wondered if anybody else had any questions that they wanted to ask. Just dying to ask. Yes.
I have one tiny thing to add. I've been involved in three to four, I don't want to call humans cases. I don't want to call humans cases, but I've been involved in 3 to 4 situations in which a gerontological social worker was extremely helpful to untangle family problems. They were psychologists with a specialty in this, also with perhaps a sideline of finding help and what kind of help and what level of help would be necessary or simply useful. And there are associations of such people. There are none who are accredited with the National Association, none out here. But in any case, it was very helpful, and family problems, who's in charge, or what John said, no, I can cope, or one of you, your mother said no, she could cope. Well, 2 of the situations were very much like that, and it needed the intervention of authority figure who was paid, a kindly authority figure, to help.
Thank you. So I think I'm going to close with a poem that my sister wrote for my mother, and then we'll we'll let the chalice out. I'm listening. Yeah.
We're ready for Zoom. Diana? You need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hello. Can you hear me? No. Oh, Carolyn is. Okay.
Can you start again, Diana? We missed the first.
Okay, I didn't get this. I I just wanted to say that I have found Compassionate Choices a very good organization, which gives you a lot of these forms to fill out, and also has a whole section about dementia and different stages of dementia and what kind of care you would like to receive in the mild stage and the moderate stage and the advanced stage. And I Xeroxed those and found them quite helpful. And if anybody in the congregation would like to have the website or the link, please just email me and I would be very happy to send it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana.
So this is the poem that my sister wrote for her mother. Nothing But Blue Skies is the title of this. Here comes the song my mother used to sing when she was packing up. Blue skies, nothing but blue skies. Here come the blue skies. Here comes my mother with her blind eyes, peering up to the sky, my mother singing while I drove. And here comes me driving that road. Here come the spaces between places, which some like to think are short and not inked in with something you can barely see, but goes on and on as you drive your long dead mother, singing in the seat next to you. Que sera, sera, she sang, when she was just hanging out with her girls, until I told her she had to stop with that song. Here comes that song in my mouth. Here comes those vowels, scratching from my throat, my voice not much better than hers, that wispy sound she made, sometimes calling to say she was lonely, where she was. Here it comes, just a little bluebird in the wilderness, waiting for the end to come, she sang in the hospital, until I told her, just a little bluebird waiting to be fed was the true line, but it was her song. And here they come, those ditties she sang in her last 2 years, wishing all the time there was some man around, and not just these weepy daughters. Shushing her, here comes the dumb, here, and not just these weepy daughters, shushing her, here comes that word, dumb, which I uttered yesterday about myself, turning down the wrong hall, having locked keys in my office, which is what she used to say about herself when she found herself with that little bit of eyesight left and those blue skies, nothing but blue skies, tilting her head. She'd say, oh, look at those jet trails. But who knows how she could see jet trails, blind as she was. Here comes the road she was driving when we didn't know she couldn't see. But later told us, oh, I find that white line and stick by it. Here comes that white line down the side of the road. Here comes my mother holding on to it. Thank you, Carol. So we extinguish this flame, but not the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now Sarah will play a closing prelude.